Good evening, I'm Michael and you're watching Kini News, the show that brings you today's biggest stories. With Perikatan Nasional passing budgets for his respective ministries at the committee stage, one minister says this proves that Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin still commands majority in Parliament.
Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Takiyuddin Hassan, told Parliament today that there is no indication that Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has lost majority support in Dewan Rakyat. Therefore, the government will not fast-track 25 no-confidence motions filed against Muhyiddin or the two other motions of support for the Pagoh MP.
Pihak pembangkang khususnya mengatakan bahawa sekiranya rang undang-undang perbekalan ataupun bajet 2021 tidak diluluskan, ianya adalah satu reflection ataupun satu andaian bahawa Perdana Menteri telah hilang kepercayaan majoriti. Namun demikian, sebagaimana yang kita semua maklum, pada 26 hari bulan 12 tahun 2020 baru-baru ini, bajet tahun 2021 telah diluluskan secara sebulat suara, manakala kurang daripada ahli parlimen yang tidak bersetuju. Itu adalah rekod di dalam Dewan Rakyat ini. Oleh sebab itu, Yang Berhormat Tuan Yang Di-Pertua, tidak timbul langsung soal kononnya ada kekurangan ataupun kehilangan sokongan majoriti terhadap Yang Amat Berhormat Pagoh.
Opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who drew flag from Pakatan Harapan MPs after backtracking from a plan to vote down the budget, had recently said a confidence motion was necessary in view of Malaysia's sovereign credit ratings downgrade by Fitch Ratings. At the same time, Takiyuddin said there is nothing to prevent parties from showing support towards any MPs to be Prime Minister. Given that there was no clear indication that Muhyiddin had lost majority support in the Dewan Rakyat, Takiyuddin said the procedure will stand for government affairs to take precedence over private matters.
What makes a good leader? His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Shah shared some advice for the state's politicians.
Perak ruler Sultan Nazrin Shah offered words of wisdom today on the meaning of good leadership. In his speech during the swearing-in of UMNO's Saurani Muhammad as Perak Menteri Besar today, the monarch said power to lead comes from God, and thus, a pious leader would submit to the divine, which includes fear or corruption.
Kekuatannya, perlindungan ke atas dirinya, dan benteng ketahanan kepada dirinya datang daripada ilahi. Dia tidak perlu menawarkan sogokan atau imbuhan untuk mendapat sokongan yang belum terjamin berkembar dengan kesetiaan. Begitu juga, dia tidak perlu melakukan ugutan atau ancaman untuk membina kekuatan diri, kerana kekuatan yang diperoleh secara demikian teramat rapuh sifatnya.
Sultan Nazrin added that an individual's true nature and character would show when he or she has positions, power and wealth.
Ketika seseorang itu mendapat jawatan dan kuasa, betapa kata tidak lagi dikota atau kata akan bertukar nada, berlainan irama, bersedia mengatakan yang hitam itu putih dan yang putih itu hitam. Wabak sebenar insan akan terpamer apabila seseorang yang telah memiliki kekayaan dan harta lalu lenyapnya budaya kesederhanaan dan merendah diri. Di sebaliknya, menjelma sifat sombong dan gelagat bongkak.
The monarch also said that leaders who have been elevated to high office should not have their heads in the clouds. Saurani was sworn in as Menteri Besar following the ouster of Bersatu's Ahmad Faisal Azumu through a vote of confidence last week.
Perak has a new Menteri Besar. I think we all know who it is. Now in office, Saurani Muhammad has promised to mend old wounds.
UMNO's Kota Tampan Assembly Person Saurani Muhammad was sworn in as Perak's 14th Menteri Besar at Istana Iskandaria in Kuala Kangsar today. This is the third swearing-in ceremony for the Menteri Besar post in Perak since the 2018 elections. Perak ruler Sultan Nazrin Shah said this historical moment reflected a failure in leadership. In his speech, the Sultan added that the people should not be made to suffer due to emotional vengeance and outdated political thinking. Meanwhile, Saurani has promised to mend wounds in his coalition. He said when 3 leaders of Bersatu, UMNO and PAS signed a joint agreement, it means they are ready to come as one. Saurani was replying to a question of how he intended to maintain his party's relationship with Bersatu and PAS. He also said he will retain the 2021 state budget prepared under his predecessor, Ahmad Faisal Azumu. Speaking to reporters after being sworn in, he said there was not enough time to put together a new budget.
Now let's take a look at the country's latest COVID-19 situation. This segment is brought to you by Blue Air. Malaysia set a record today with the highest number of new COVID-19 cases recorded in a single day, with 2,234 cases. On top of that, the Health Ministry reported that 70% of all new cases reported today were detected in the Klang Valley region. The last record of 2,188 was set on November 24th. According to the Selangor Health Department, the massive spike in Selangor was due to new cases detected from the Seruling cluster involving workplace testing. The new cases mainly involve the Kapa and Klang locality, but have spread across various districts in the state. There was also a large spike in the Hentian cluster, an existing cluster which emerged from the Kajang bus station. With the massive spike, the number of active cases have jumped to 11,867. Currently, there are 128 patients being treated in the ICU, while 60 of them are being incubated. COVID-19 doesn't care who you are. Even if you're the health minister, the same rules still apply.
Health Minister Dr. Adham Baba has been ordered to undergo home quarantine after coming into close contact with a COVID-19 patient. Adham revealed this in a post on Facebook this morning. He said the patient was a private media practitioner who was at his office last Saturday and has since tested positive. Malaysia Kini was made to understand that the media practitioner mentioned was not a journalist. Adham said he will be in quarantine until December 18th and that he will work from home throughout that period. Adham also emphasized that all citizens should comply with quarantine instructions and that no one is exempted from orders issued by the authorities. As of December 9th, Malaysia recorded 393 fatalities from COVID-19.
The allocation for JCOM, formerly known as JASA, has been cut by more than half.
The allocation for the Communications and Multimedia Ministry to revive the Special Affairs Department, JASA, has been slashed by RM45 million from the initial RM85 million announced. This was followed by the tabling of a motion from the opposition to slash the entire RM85.5 million allocation. Deputy Finance Minister Abdul Rahim Bakri tabled the government motion prior to debates on the Communications and Multimedia Ministry's overall budget under the Supply Bill 2021. Abdul Rahim added that the reduced amount of RM40.5 million will be used to fund the ministry's rebranded Jabatan Komunikasi Community, JCOM, as previously announced by Finance Minister Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz in the initial budget debate. Government MPs who debated for Abdul Rahim's motion argued that JCOM was needed to ensure the right information can be disseminated to the people, as well as to provide jobs for former JASA officers terminated during Pakatan Harapan's rule. Meanwhile, MPs from the opposition bench insisted that the rebranded outfit will be used as a propaganda tool. They also argued that the intended functions can be carried out by existing agencies, including the Information Department. Saifuddin said JCOM was needed as many agencies under the ministry only exist at federal and state levels with no foot soldiers on the ground.
Dan itu antara tugas yang kita harus berikan dan mengapa kita harus tubuhkan JCOM ini.
Tuan Speaker, saya minta penjelasan kerana Menteri bagi contoh JKM tadi, saya rasa kita perlu rekodkan dalam Hansard bahawa JKM mempunyai unit komunikasi sendiri dan KPWKM mempunyai unit komunikasi mereka sendiri. Sudah ada 2 layer. Kenapa sekarang perlu subkontrak kepada KKMM? Dan tadi Menteri ada mengatakan bahawa KKMM perlu membantu Menteri KPWKM untuk promote produk mereka dan perkhidmatan mereka. I can tell you, no repackaging can help a bad content. Thank you.
Tuan Pengerusi, ini yang bercakap ni bekas Timbalan Menteri. Patutlah kerajaan tu tak lama.
Coming up next, people with significant allergies have been told to stay away from Pfizers vaccine. Anyone with a history of anaphylaxis to medicine or food should not get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Britain's medicine regulator has advised that people with a history of significant allergies do not get Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine. This warning came after 2 National Health Service workers reported severe adverse reactions on the first day of vaccine rollout. Both workers are recovering, according to NHS Medical Director Stephen Powys. Britain began mass vaccinating its population on Tuesday, starting with the elderly and frontline workers. Pfizer has said people with history of allergic reactions were excluded from their late-stage trials. The new guideline from Britain's medicine regulator, the MHRA, also include a much broader segment that should not take the vaccine.
The US Federal Trade Commission and nearly every US state sued Facebook, saying that it broke antitrust law and should be potentially broken up.
The US Federal Trade Commission and nearly every US state sued Facebook on Wednesday, saying that it violated antitrust law and should potentially be broken up. That could mean the forced sale of 2 major platforms it owns, Instagram and WhatsApp. Led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, the coalition of 46 states, Washington, D.C. and Guam accused the behemoth social media company of using its dominance in the industry to crush the competition.
For nearly a decade, Facebook has used its dominance and monopoly power to crush smaller rivals and snuff out competition, all at the expense of everyday users.
The complaints on Wednesday accused Facebook of buying up rivals, focusing specifically on its previous acquisitions of Instagram for $1 billion and messaging app WhatsApp for $19 billion. Federal and state regulators said the acquisitions should be unwound.
Facebook would try to squeeze every bit of oxygen out of the room for smaller companies that refuse to be bought. They also sent a clear message to the industry. Don't step on Facebook's turf. Or, as one industry executive put it, you will face the wrath of Mark.
Facebook's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, told employees in July that Facebook would go to the mat to fight a legal challenge to break up the company, calling it an existential threat, according to audio of internal company meetings published by The Verge. The U.S. Department sued Alphabet's Google in October, accusing the $1 trillion company of using its market power to fend off rivals. The lawsuits are the biggest antitrust cases in a generation. Facebook shares fell nearly 2% after the news.
Starbucks says customers will flock back to stores once the health crisis eases, and when that happens, the Starbucks experience could be a bit different.
Certainly as vaccines come and we start turning the dial up, I have no doubt in my mind the customer response coming to Starbucks is immediate because we have seen it as we open up limited seating.
Starbucks Chief Executive Officer Kevin Johnson says customers will flock back to stores once the health crisis eases. And when they do, the Starbucks experience could be a bit different. The company is building walk-through locations, a metro twist on the suburban drive-through. At these new to-go locations, orders will primarily be placed digitally and paid for ahead of time. Johnson explained the concept in an interview with Reuters ahead of the company's biennial Investor Day.
In sort of suburban areas, the complement of having a cafe where customers can go sit down as well as a drive-through has really opened up the kinds of experiences that customers are seeking. But what we're trying to do is build the equivalent of a drive-through in a dense metropolitan area, which I think of it as a walk-through. And so Starbucks Pickup is a walk-through store. We call it Starbucks Now in China. And in these dense metropolitan areas, what we envision is that for every Starbucks Pickup store we have, that within a 3 to 5 minute walk will be a Starbucks with a traditional cafe that you can go sit in and enjoy your beverage and meet with a colleague or a friend or a family member.
In mainland China, the chain's fastest growing market, the Starbucks Now stores will make up 10% of the 600 stores it plans to open there in the next year. Starbucks is among several big restaurant chains expected to become even larger after the pandemic, as they capitalize on drive-through, pickup, delivery, and their hefty corporate financial cushions. Altogether, Starbucks expects to grow nearly 70% to 55,000 locations globally over the next decade. For future growth, Johnson said he is leaning on artificial intelligence, a suite of products Starbucks calls Deep Brew, to give store managers an edge in how they run their locations. The goal is not to displace employees, but to have them focus on customer service instead. The technology can create staff schedules and automate inventory management. Starbucks is also using AI to assess local COVID-19 cases, customer preferences, and employee sentiment in order to recommend, on a store-by-store basis, whether and how to slowly reopen locations.
And that is all from me today. For more stories, you can go to KiniTV.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook for the latest news updates. I'll be back with more tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Michael. Thank you for watching.